All right, all right. Hello, everybody. Good morning. We're welcome to Trump's New America, Trump version 2.0. Well, today we're not really going to be talking about Donald Trump. Today we've got two guests. We're going to be doing interviews. We have first Stan Smith, who has written a great article that Gloria and Jeremy are going to be talking to, and then we have what's his name, Stephen. Forgot his last name. I'm so sorry. Stephen Brown. Sorry. Oh, I should remember that one. Okay. Stephen Brown's going to come on also to talk to us about RFK Jr. He's going to be there. Why the medical industrial complex is trying to uh, thwart his ability of becoming the human health and human services secretary. So we've got these two different clips that are coming on. These are going to be recorded for the radio broadcast on WBAI and the Progressive Radio Network. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring on Gloria and Jayme Kuzmarov. Hello, guys. All right.
Hey,
We
Jayme.
also have a guest, Stan Smith. Welcome, Stan. So we're going to kick this off. Gloria's going to take over and run this show the way it needs to be run. So you guys ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, a former administrator in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Disclaimer. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and form their own opinions. This presentation is not intended to incite, promote, or encourage any discriminatory or illegal activity. Our topic for today is on the compatible left, and we have a wonderful guest, Stansfield Smith, who is a journalist who has written extensively on Latin America, and he's now also writing on Syria. I know Stansfield Smith from the work that we've both done on Nicaragua, when in 2018 there was this talk of a color revolution, which we believed, and there was also this talk about an insurrection, which Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Believed. And that was when I first had my eyes open to what is the compatible left and how dangerous it is for someone and a broadcast station or program that appears to be with us on the left, but is actually not. And what happened in my personal life that I'd just like to talk about very briefly is my undergraduate degree was from SUNY Westbury. And after the color revolution in Nicaragua, I went back to SUNY Westbury to try to enlighten people how this is a color revolution. This is a NED CIA undertaking. And one of the professors there came back at me and said, no, it isn't, because Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Said that this was an insurrection, and that wonderful, president of Nicaragua was really a dictator, which was a complete lie. So one of the things I also want to talk about is this goal of the CIA to isolate a target. And how it does that is it has the right saying this particular individual is a communist and will take away all your rights and throw you in prison. So you have this chatter from the right. And then it also uses this chatter from the compatible left, which I would like to call the contemptible left. That's on the other side, saying the other narrative that this person isn't communist enough, or isn't socialist enough, or isn't for the people enough. So when you have both of these things going on at the same time, it makes that particular target more vulnerable. So I'm going to take it away and hand this over to Stan. Please tell us about your fantastic article. And I just like to mention the name of it. It's Compatible Left Joins Imperialism in Celebrating the Defeat of Syria. And this was published by Covert Action Magazine on January 8th, 2025. Thank you. Stan, take it away.
Thanks for inviting me here. I wrote that on Syria because I got really angry after the overthrew the Assad government, that all these leftist people I know were celebrating it as some kind of victory for the people of Syria, which, I mean, in fact, it was the Al-Qaeda type organization taking over Syria. There's no victory there for the people of Syria. Furthermore, it's a major defeat for the resistance and the Palestinians. That one of their ways that they get armament and aid is from Iran to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. Now that is cut. And all these people who are supporting the Palestinian struggle, nevertheless, I mean, that doesn't matter to them that this now has been cut, and the resistance in the Middle East against the U.S. and Israel has been terribly weakened because of this coup in Syria. And it's also, I was rather insulted or offended that all these leftist people just seem to ignore the fact that we can remember in 2007, Jeremy Clark was with Amy Goodman on an interview that said that the U.S. government had 7 countries that it wanted to overthrow in the Middle East. And now it's basically got rid of 6 of them. The one left is Iran, that's untouched so far. So obviously that's next. I mean, that's 20 years ago. I'm sure everybody who celebrates the victory in Syria, whatever they want to call it, is perfectly aware of this interview that Wesley Clark gave, because I've seen it over and over and over again over the years. So it's nothing new what the U.S. was out to do in Syria. Furthermore, we know from a New York Times article back in 2017 that that the U.S. or the CIA had already spent $1 billion trying to overthrow the government in Syria. So there's the fact that the U.S. was operating some regime change operation in Syria is hardly anything new. And all these people who they're not opposed to the U.S. intervention in Syria. They're not. They don't say anything about what the U.S. has been doing there. They just ignore all this information that is right. I mean, almost all leftist people must know this stuff. They read the New York Times. They know about Amy Goodman's interview. They just cover it up. Now, that's what I called in this article compatible leftists. I think it was particularly atrocious that I saw the Counterpunch, which used to be a decent leftist anti-imperialist website back when Alexander Coburn was still around. Now they're just cheerleaders for this coup. They had articles right after the overthrow of Assad saying it was ridiculous to say that the U.S. or Israel had anything to do with the overthrow of the government in Syria, which, I mean, that's like insane to think the U.S. and Israel had nothing to do with it. You could actually say that, but they actually ran that in one of their articles. And then he had another one interviewing Stephen Zunes, basically saying the same thing. And he's one of these more, I mean, he was all for overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya. And he's a guy that his funding comes from basically through the Atlantic Council, through the Ackerman on the Atlantic Council. Now, what we find is a lot of these compatible leftist people they do get funding through foundations, and the CIA indirectly, oftentimes it's hard to trace. And these people are often elevated as spokespeople on the left. And the people who are real anti-imperialists, they're kind of excluded from a lot of alternate media and the websites, and the press, and on the webinars, because they don't, they're just excluded.
We feel you.
Excluded, or your article, I remember that they had insults hurled at them. I think Zunis and some of these other articles called them tankies, and using terms of neo-McCarthyism to denigrate principled anti-war, anti-imperialists, correct?
Yes. Well, I remember years ago they used to call themselves anti-imperialists, but I guess they realized, well, if we say we say that we're anti-imperialist, that kind of gives away shows our hand about what we're actually about. So they dropped that designation for these just name calling people as Stalinists, like they're actually, Stalinism is having some resurrection around the world or something. And tankies and campus and Assadists and Putinists, which just.
Well, I wasn't aware that the compatible left was actually a term that the CIA coined.
Well, I'm not sure that I was trying to find the actual source to give an actual reference. I know in the books I was reading about, like the Cultural Cold War and the Grand Wurlitzer and the Finks. Yeah. I couldn't find actual quote where the CIA called them that. They referred to the non-communist left as a compatible left.
Yeah.
I mean, that's back when there was a communist bloc and mass communist parties.
But that seems to be the lineage. Listeners may be familiar with Francis Stoner Saunders wrote an important study on the Congress of Cultural Freedom, which was a CIA front operation that financed all kinds of intellectuals, and usually left-wing intellectuals, but got them to steer their positions toward anti-communism and to promote the evils of Soviet totalitarianism, and often to ridicule the left. And then many morphed into neoconservatives. So perhaps that's the parallel we see going forward today.
I've witnessed a lot of stuff coming from Soros, and it seems internationally you have more of the open society. And that's kind of the way that Soros goes in internationally. And domestically, it seems to be the Tides Foundation. So for our audience, if you want to find out if something is compatible, look for the Tides Foundation. That's a very good fingerprint to look at. The other point that I just want to make is how dangerous it is when you have something like Democracy Now! And they get some things right. Like they talk about pollution, and they talk about protecting indigenous lands. So they kind of open us up, and then we start believing them. And then when they put in some CIA or deep state or State Department talking points, we're like, oh, okay, well, they were right on environment, so of course they're going to be right on this. So it's extremely dangerous.
Well, and also what Democracy Now! Does is they play up the human rights angle. So it's all about how horrible Assad or Gaddafi is, and we have to celebrate these civil society human rights activists who are fighting this dictatorship. And that's exactly the same line as the State Department. And I mean, not all those regimes do have a dark side. I mean, there are real victims of the Assad or Gaddafi government. So it's not total lies. It's just totally one side, and they don't address the geopolitical ramifications, the U.S. involvement. They don't also address the positive of those governments, how they, helped eradicate poverty to some extent, promoted free education, healthcare. And yeah, they whitewash the opposition. They make like the opposition are all these great pro-democrats, when both Syria and Libya were led by Islamic extremists. And then now there's no reporting. I mean, there have been a lot of crime. Even the New York Times has reported between the lines on pogroms that are being carried out by the Al-Qaeda government in Syria, purges against former Assad elements, hunting them down, who knows how many executions, hunting down and imprisoning minority groups. This is totally ignored. It's a one-sided human rights reporting, and that's exactly how the U.S. State Department does it. And they get liberals to empathize with the victim of those dictatorships.
And they love to like exploit particular identity groups, like, oh, it's women. Oh, it's
it's always a woman human rights activist who's
or a trans activist. It's always something.
Yeah, because that government's terrible on gay rights supposedly. So,
Well, there's
go ahead, Stan.
Sorry. Yeah, the compatible left does have to look like it's left, like Amy Goodman does. Usually, like historically, they've been supporting and calling for and defending social reforms at home while supporting U.S. imperialist policy around the world, either directly or putting it in a nicer human rights veneer wrapping. And that helps them maintain their credibility. And now they have Trump. They can all be anti-Trumper people and makes them look like they're progressive. And the problem with that is that Trump is part of the system, and doesn't matter that much who's president. It's the empire that's the problem. But if you're just going to focus on one party, that you're just misleading people about what's the problem. But I did want to mention a little of the things that the compatible left has done to help spread lies of the misinformation that comes from the State Department that they just repeat. I mean, you talked about Nicaragua. There's also, they're trying to say that Gaddafi had plans for mass rape and murder in Syria. There are all sorts of stories about Hamas killed 1,200 people on October 7th, 2023, when it was really not true. And they raped civilians there on that day, which is also not true. They go on about the Chinese genocide in Xinjiang. They support all the human rights democracy movement in Hong Kong back 5 years ago. And they just cover up the U.S. and British role in supporting those. They support all these so-called human rights movements in Iran, and cover up that I've read I forget where I read it, nothing leftist, that the U.S. had spent $400 million supporting these so-called human rights groups in Iran just in like 2010 to 2012. They also helped spread the story that Evo Morales stole the election in Bolivia in 2019. And now they spread the story. I also wrote another article about this, about the compatible left in Venezuela.
Yes.
They're trying to say that Maduro and the Chavistas stole the election in Venezuela last July.
Well, one thing I just have to jump in on that one. I was covering the election for Covert Action magazine, and I did some research into Gonzalez, and it turns out he has this legacy in El Salvador with the CIA as an informant, and he was actually one of the two people that was identifying targets for the military police in El Salvador. And he and his partner were referred to as priest killers. So it just completely is insane that he's kind of pimped out as being this grandfather, this kindly grandfather who loves birds, when he has a legacy as a priest killer. And then the right goes on how religious they are. And then holds this individual up as someone to emulate, and he's a thug. It's hideous. Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead. I couldn't help myself.
One of the probably the biggest campaigns that I've seen around that the leftists support is the story of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, which, I mean, even people like Mersheimer and I forget his name right now, have done very good exposés about how the U.S. created this whole situation. But I know, like the demonstration that we had here on January 20th, the anti-war demonstration, the anti-Trump demonstration, they excluded any mention of the war in Ukraine. They didn't want to take a side on this. It's like, so you're having an anti-Trump demonstration, but you're not opposed to the U.S. imperialist war in Ukraine with Russia that could go nuclear. It's
And yeah, the student demonstrators. I was at the Left Forum, and they're all so fixated on the Israel-Gaza, which I mean is a horror show. But I mean, why don't they broaden their critique of U.S. imperialism and address the U.S. as you say, the creation of that mess that's leading us to World War III in Ukraine, and that's caused huge human rights abuses. I mean, U.S. weapons. They're not focused on. They're trying to expose how their campus is producing weapons for Israel or scientists, but not for Ukraine. When the U.S. government has spent billions and billions, and those weapons have killed a lot of innocent people, as you know. I did an article on a ballerina, a young girl of 12, was walking from her practice, and she was a top flight ballerina, and she was murdered by a rocket from the Ukrainian army. And there's no anguish on Democracy Now!, no interviews with these people. While they are focused on Gaza. So it's kind of weird. I mean, that I don't know. I mean, I agree with you about the funding, but there's some weird psychology at play as well.
Well, I think some of it is that a lot of leftist people don't want to be seen as in any way supporting Trump. They want to stay very far, like take the issue of why isn't the war in Ukraine and Russia part of the January 20 demonstrations? Well, is it because Trump says he wants to end the war right away and the Democrats don't? And if we make this a issue in the demonstrations, then it's going to, well, maybe they're actually supporting Trump because they want to end the same war that he wants to end. So, like, no, they won't go near that.
Yeah,
I don't think they also talk about how Trump, of what I've read, put a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to sign a peace agreement. Well, not peace agreement, a ceasefire that's going to be very temporary. They don't want to mention anything about that. It's like anything that's in any way paints Trump as other than a fascist, they don't want to go near.
I see that. Yeah, that's the Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, it's all over.
And a lot of people, like we went to this Rage Against the War Machine rally that was trying to bring right and left together into a broad coalition against the Ukraine war and U.S. endless wars, and a lot of leftists boycotted it because there was one speaker they claimed was white supremacist when actually he wasn't. If you look into what he said, I didn't think he was white supremacist. So. But I mean, that is politics. You have to build coalitions, but they refuse to do that.
Well, there's another funding source that's really come out that we've been looking at, and it's Singham, Roy Singham, and it goes into these other groups, and you'd think that they were all independent, but they're really not. And these were all the groups that were boycotting the Rage Against the War Machine, and you have the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, United Community Fund, Justice and Education Fund, Code Pink, People's Support Foundation, NewsClick, Breakthrough News, the Answer Coalition, Party for Socialism and Liberation, the People's Forum. So these are groups that are more anti-imperialist, but they maintain this, you're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. And when the chips fall, as they may, they fall into the Democrat category. So we talk a lot about this team sports mentality. And as you said earlier, Stan, we see things as the empire. We don't see things as who sits in the White House and claims to be a Democrat or claims to be a Republican. We see the whole body, which is the empire. Well, that wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov and our special guest, Stan Smith. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. So long.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Great insights.
Thanks.
Okay, Gloria, you wrapped up about a minute.
Ah,
Well, about 30
jeez.
seconds too soon.
I'm trying, Jayme. I'm trying to be precise here.
You got one last question you want to ask, and then I can have a minute to pad.
Okay, go ahead. Talk a little bit more, Stan. Give us some more juice.
Oh, well, I could say first. I got in arguments with UNAC about they're not supporting that Rage Against the War machine. I said we should work with whoever is anti-war. Period. We always have. If you're against the war, that's the issue. Your issue on some other subjects that are not part of the demonstration is not an issue to exclude people, because those are not issues of this rally. But I do know that Medea Benjamin was going to speak at that. Code Pink put all sorts of pressure on her, and so she said, well, my organization is telling me they don't want me to speak. So
Roy Neville Singham.
But she did go to it. Yeah, it was disgraceful that. I mean, it's a very bad example. There's also a lot of what I would call right-wing 20 years ago websites and people who are now very anti-war. And maybe they're anti-intervention or isolation. Well, if they want to call it, I'm not sure what word to use. But they have very good information about U.S. wars and what's really going on.
Exactly.
And if we don't work with these people, we're just isolating ourselves.
Yeah. And I live in a conservative state, and I had a lot of students who were libertarian, but they were anti-war. And I taught courses critical on U.S. foreign policy, and they were very eager students, and I got along well with them. And I mean, in some cases, you can try and sway them on economic policy if you don't agree. I mean, I find a lot of those people very open-minded. You have a discussion, they might even hear you out and change some of their views. So what's the point of boycotting? You can talk to these people. They're good people. They don't want violence. They share a lot of the same values. So, and politics always makes for strained bedfellows. That's the nature of politics. So.
And it should be our job not to preach to the choir. I mean, we look at the work that the Black Panthers did and Fred Hampton did, reaching across to Confederate groups.
Yeah.
And made tremendous success, and that's why it's not allowed.
Yeah, and that's how left
a united front is not what they want.
You reach out in Middle America, where a lot of the people are libertarian or maybe more conservative on cultural issues, but as you point out, Stan, it has nothing to do with what we're fighting against. So.
That's true. All right, guys. I think I got enough with Stan's extra pontificating there at the end. I think I can squeeze that in right before the end. So thank you very much for that. Gloria, next time, Gloria, remember, when you don't have to wrap it up until you see this. When that pops up on screen, that's when you need to get ready. Okay.
No, I saw the 1 minute. All right.
Yeah, I remember we had one more minute to go.
Okay. Okay. All right. Wrap it up. Wrap it up. Okay.
A minute, then wrap it up. Okay.
All right.
All right. Stan, thank you so much. That was great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Stan.
Thanks for having me on
again, Stan.
We'll have you again.
And if you have any articles,
great articles coming.
For covert action, send them my way.
And I was at that Rage Against the War Machine rally, and it was a great time, and more people should have been there. I mean, that's why I ran into Boston. And
they were great speakers, and
All right, so thank you so much, and I think we got Stephen Brown in the wings, or he's around there somewhere. But thank you so much, Dan. All right, Stephen is here, but he's not here. So, do we want to wait for him to jump on screen? Do you want to maybe give him?
Let me give him a call. Yeah. Okay. Let me mute my microphone and give him a call and find out where.
All right. So I know he's here. We've got him backstage, but He's just not on camera. So Stan was great.
Excellent. We'll
Very
try and
good.
have him
Very
on
good
again.
guest.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, looks like he's coming back. He did something. He changed his camera. Oh boy. This is a problem with juggling two guests, and you can't get them both ready before you go on the show. So you just got to hope that the second guest, when they jump in, that they're good. They got good mic and audio, or good camera as well. All right. This is the challenges of doing live recordings.
He says
All
he's
right,
ready.
Gloria.
I don't know. Do you see
All
him?
right. No, he's there. I can see him. He's just not on camera.
Yeah. Well, if we have his audio, that's okay.
True. But he's muted right now.
All right, I'm not muted.
Okay. He's on stage. We got no
There
camera.
he is.
We can't
Okay.
see your face.
Yeah, we've got your background.
Where the hell are you? There he is.
There he is. There he is.
All right.
There he is.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready to roll.
All right. So, are we ready to do part 2, our second segment for this week? And Gloria, okay, I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Just remember, you don't wrap it up till you see this on the screen.
Yes,
When
sir.
you see that, that's when
Sorry.
you got to get ready to finish the thought and then wrap up the show. All right. I'm going to drop out and you start when you're ready.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Left on Left, where the left critiques itself and laughs out loud to keep from crying. I'm Gloria Guillo, a former administrator in New York City government, an investigative journalist, vice chair at WBAI Radio, and a co-founder of Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, a group so left it's right on. I'm joined here today by a resident expert, Jayme Kuzmarov. Jayme is a professor at Tulsa Community College, a historian, investigative journalist, and managing editor of Covert Action Magazine, an online magazine that focuses on CIA and deep state activity. Our producer and engineer is Jayme, CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. The content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Viewers are encouraged to conduct their own research and form their own opinions. This presentation is not intended to incite, promote, or encourage any discriminatory or illegal activity. Our topic for today is on Robert F. Kennedy. We're going to discuss the medical industrial complex's campaign against him and his appointment as Secretary of the HHS. And we are joined by journalist Stephen Brown. Stephen Brown is going to discuss, does Robert F. Kennedy need a medical degree to combat price gouging on prescription drugs, to punish insurance executives who deny coverage, and remove government health regulators who take bribes? Take it away, Steve.
Hello, glad to be here. I don't know where I'm going to take it, but I'm glad you invited me on. My main reason for coming on is to provide some hope for people. You know, Norman Finkelstein said a little while ago that with Biden and Harris, there is no hope for change, no hope for anything good. With Trump, nobody knows. It's a roll of the dice. And any sensible person would take a roll of the dice because Trump may be no better, but he couldn't possibly be any worse than Biden-Harris. And the fact that Trump wants to appoint Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of HHS is a very good sign. HHS is the largest department in government, larger even than the military. It's about $1.2 trillion, $1.3 trillion, whereas the military, as far as we know, is under $1 trillion. Robert F. Kennedy, if he is appointed, and that's a question that's up in the air, would bring incredible changes to this huge governmental agencies, which would ripple throughout the entire government. And the medical industrial complex is absolutely in a panic because he would clean it out. Some of the terrible things that have happened over the past decades are a result of the cooperation or collusion, I might call it, between the pharmaceutical industry and the governmental agencies like the FDA and the CDC and the WHO, all of which have been captured by the pharmaceutical industry. For example, the last 10 directors of the FDA, 9 of them have gone on to jobs in the pharmaceutical industry. In other words, they went to work for the companies that they spent the last several years regulating. So it's not a far cry to think about the conflict of interest in a director of the FDA who's thinking about whether to approve a drug that can give billions of dollars to a pharmaceutical company, and whether he's going to be employed by that company after he leaves the government. They come from the pharmaceutical industry, they go back to the pharmaceutical industry. RFK Jr. will stop that. Another thing he will ban, which is a huge benefit to the pharmaceutical industry, is TV ads for drugs. No other industrial nation permits anything like that. This would be stopped. Right now, you have people flocking to their doctor's offices saying, I want such and such a drug. I saw it on television. And that's certainly not a good thing. But one of the more interesting facts is that about a week ago, the pharmaceutical industry got 15,000 doctors to sign a letter saying that RFK Jr. shouldn't be director of HHS because he doesn't have a medical degree. I mean, how can you have a guy heading up a bureau supposedly in charge of health in the United States and he has no scientific background and no medical degree? Well, nobody bothered looking at the history of this department because the last 20 secretaries of HHS, 3 of them maybe, had any medical background or any scientific background at all. All of the other 17 were politicians or diplomats or friends of the president or big donors to the president's campaign. This is a fact. Anybody can go look that up. So the cynicism of that claim that he needs a medical degree to head this department is ludicrous. And those 15,000 doctors who signed, I don't know who they are, but you have to understand that the medical profession is terrified because they can lose doctors who don't toe the line, lose their jobs, they lose their position, they lose their reputation, they're ridiculed in the media. If they're working with universities or hospitals, they lose their grants, and so the hospitals get rid of them. They are terrified. Many of them know how bad, for example, the COVID vaccines have been, but they did not say anything because if they did, they would be in big trouble. Many of them knew that ivermectin was a valid treatment for COVID, but they did not say anything because the government and the AMA and the rest of the medical profession use these people as examples. For example, Meryl Nass, who is a very distinguished physician, epidemiologist, was treating her patients with ivermectin to very good effect. Other people were dying, her patients were not. Well, the medical governing group of her state, I forget whether it's Maine or Vermont, threatened to take away her license. Maybe they did. They said she can't practice unless she goes into psychiatric evaluation for using ivermectin on her patients. That speaks to the old Stalinist practice. If they had a dissident, they would not shoot him or kill him. They would simply declare him insane and put him in an asylum. And that's.
I just want to insert this. This content is intended for information and education purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional advice. Please continue.
And there was a case, Steve, in France of a doctor who was put in an insane asylum, I believe. I forget his name off the top of my head, but this is a pattern we're seeing across Europe where they're putting these doctors actually, in a few cases, in insane asylums. I don't know if you're aware of that case, but.
One thing I just want to point out from like a CIA tactic standpoint or a deep state or State Department tactic is the concept of narrative front loading, where you have this narrative and you put it out there proactively so that when the event happens, people already have kind of formed this opinion. So with Robert F. Kennedy, you have this group of doctors putting out this letter, and that's to try to front load this narrative, and when you really look at Robert F. Kennedy's, record, he's really fought against all of the drug companies. He's fought against environmental polluters, and he's been very successful. And I think, Steve, you could talk a little bit more about that, but I just want to kind of explain this concept. It's another concept. It's called the phenomena of flooding information to conceal the truth, is also referred to as information overload, and we see that happening here too, with Robert F. Kennedy's selection. When used,
go ahead, Gloria. Sorry.
When used intentionally to obscure the truth or manipulate public perception, it is sometimes called censorship through noise or flooding the zone. So that's what we're really seeing also, are these flooding the zone, narrative front loading, So, for our audience, really, when you see this orchestra of information coming at you against an individual or a concept from multiple sources, stand back and say, is this information, flooding the zone, or is this really true? And always maintain your own judgment. Thank you.
And they're often using, almost every article in which he's mentioned, like in the New York Times or related publications, even on left outlets like Democracy Now!, he's called a conspiracy theorist with a very negative connotation.
That's part of his name. That's part of his
exactly.
Conspiracy theorist Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
And the people who hurl these words, they never want to engage with his books. For instance, I tried to take an open mind, and I went to the bookstore to read his book because I hadn't followed his career. I heard all the hoopla, and actually for a time I believed it, I'll admit. I went to Barnes & Noble. Of course, they didn't have his book, but they did order it for me. I read it, and I was extremely impressed. I read a lot of books, and I judge the scholarly quality. I mean, there were huge ton of footnotes, tremendous research, a lot of good logic, and good questions he raised. He didn't answer everything, but he was honest. He was raising some important questions. He had good historical insight. And so I was really impressed with the intellectual caliber, and I've been totally disgusted by the low intellectual caliber of those attacking him. And there are other issues, like he's been at the forefront in something like cell phones and how they may cause cancer, and they called him a conspiracy theorist for that. I actually, when I was in college, I had a summer job with a company that was investigating that, and there was a lot of research that there are problems with cell phones. So it's just, here's a guy who cares about health, and he's done research in these areas and knows a lot, and he's often right. And the people who attack him are just know-nothings. And, there's some come from these exalted universities. It's really sad to see them stoop to this level of McCarthyism and anti-intellectualism. So I just wanted to point that out. That's what's really disgusted me.
Yeah, it's true. By the way, your characterization of what's going on as narrative front loading is just a fancy term for what the military is always called softening up the opposition. Before you send in the ground troops, you try to destroy the other side with artillery, so that when the ground troops come along, they have a much easier time. And that's what narrative front loading is. It's you just destroy the opposition and then walk through. It's unfortunate. On January 29th is when the hearings are scheduled to be held for Robert F. Kennedy's appointment. Those are the committee hearings. What happens is the committee listens to him, I hope, and decides whether his nomination is even worth bringing to the floor for a vote. If the committee says, no, we're not even going to bring this for a vote, it doesn't even get to the floor of the Senate for a vote. And that's going to be a matter not of whether Robert F. Kennedy is going to be a good or a bad Secretary of HHS, but who has the political power to squelch his nomination or push it through. January 29th, Trump will already be in office. He is in office now. Let's see how powerful he is. On the one hand, Trump will not be able to run for president again. So his leverage against those who oppose him is weakened. On the other hand, since he's not going to have to run for president again, he doesn't give a damn about what happens. He doesn't have to kiss anybody's backside. So we will see. You don't have to like Trump or admire his policies, but the fact is that he is a man with a grudge, and that's the biggest advantage for the United States. When Trump first came into office, he was naive. He didn't understand. His whole administration was riddled with deep state operatives who thwarted him at every turn. He might not have liked what he wanted to do, but he was prevented from doing much of what he wanted or what he thought he wanted. He's much smarter now. He's much more sophisticated. Let's see what happens. It should be quite interesting. He wants to destroy those people in the establishment that made his life so difficult. They changed him from a rock star to a buffoon, to a clown, to the butt of every joke on late night TV, and he wants to get even with them, and he will kick them out, and he wants to kick out the people that I'm very happy to see him kick out. So his, call it petty, grudge to settle the score may be a very good thing for this country. He's a very determined fellow. He doesn't bow down to power because he thinks he's more powerful than anyone else. It should be a very interesting administration.
Well, a little bit back to JFK talking points. Some of the victories that he's had are in agriculture, in chemical and manufacturing, in oil company spills, in energy, in the coal industry, municipal infrastructure, wastewater plants, victories with the New York City watershed, negotiated an agreement that balanced urban water supply needs with environmental conservation, setting a global model for watershed protection. And he's led lawsuits that focused on childhood exposure to toxins. I mean, there's been a tremendous global indigenous rights. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of great things that Robert F. Kennedy has done that don't get any publicity, and it's unfortunate. And
they used to get publicity. They don't anymore. You talked. Your prior guest talked about the compatible left. The left was always happy to cheer when he was talking about cleaning up the water or cleaning up the air or removing environmental pollutants. That didn't make any structural changes in this country. But now that he's talking about things that will cause incredible shakeup in powerful interests, he's not being cheered anymore, and his accomplishments are being buried. And the fact is, he's he's not afraid of big companies because he's gone up against them in court and beat them time and again. And that bothers people. He also has a grudge. He knows
Yes.
very well that the establishment killed his father and killed his uncle. It's not a secret. And he and Trump together, I mean, he is not going to be limited to HHS. If he has Trump's ear and Trump listens, there'll be tremendous changes throughout government. And the first thing we will see is the release of the JFK assassination papers, the RFK assassination papers, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. There is so much that this government has done, or rather the establishment has done, that we should be ashamed of, that hopefully will be released. On the other hand, there is nobody who can't be killed these days, and it's not a secret that people fear for RFK Jr.'s life, Trump's life, maybe even Tulsi Gabbard's life. It's a really open vista as far as the possibilities are concerned, and some people say it's unfortunate that the great opportunity for change has been put in the hands of somebody that they don't like, who is Trump. I don't know him. I hear he's a very nice fellow. I know people who know Trump very well, and they say he's a nice fellow. On the other hand, they say that Stalin and Hitler and Marcos were all very nice to their friends. So, and they were very kind to their dogs and cats. You never can tell.
Well, one thing also that people could focus on is this immunity that the drug companies were given, and especially with immunizations in particular, and that has resulted in the increase of immunizations in the childhood schedule. And I think I recall maybe 10 immunizations when I was a child, and I think it's up to something like 78. I'm not sure the exact number.
72 is the number, the magic number. 72 shots.
So do you think that will change immediately when he comes in, if he comes in?
Well, I don't know. There's there's administrative inertia. You can't turn the government around on a dime, just like you can't turn an ocean liner around on a dime. It takes time. So I don't know exactly where the levers are, and I would assume that RFK Jr. has been studying this for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. Sure, that's one of the things. The irony is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as he said many times, but as never gets printed in the New York Times, he is not against vaccines. All his children are vaccinated. He is vaccinated. He is against vaccines that are not sufficiently tested. He is against vaccines that got approval because of rigged tests. One of the most important privileges that the drug industry has from the FDA is called pre-screening when they do their drug tests. When they have a new vaccine, for example, before the clinical test begins, they take all of the participants and they give them doses of whatever it is. And those who develop allergies or side effects or any bad consequences at all are excluded from the test. So that once the test begins, they're not getting a representative sample of the population. They're getting a clean group, most of whom will not show any adverse effects. So, that's scandalous. So that when the clinical test is finished, they get very good results. And here's the next part. If the results are bad, they can junk that test. They're not obligated to show those results to the FDA or to the public or to the peer-reviewed journals. So they keep testing until they get the results that they want. And so virtually any drug that's been okayed is the product of a corrupt testing system. And that's what RFK Jr. will try to stop.
Also, some of these vaccinations make absolutely no sense. I mean, there's one for the Hep 2 virus, which is given to babies. And to contract the Hep 2 virus, you have to be a drug user or having sex with a drug user.
Correct.
So, I mean, we're talking babies. I mean, it makes no rhyme or reason. I mean, there needs to be some. There needs to be. Well, if you're making money, sure.
That's right. It makes perfect sense. Look, of all the drugs, a vaccine is the most profitable drug for a company because a drug aimed at a specific disease has a limited market. A vaccine has the potential of being taken by everybody. And so drug companies are making vaccines like crazy for everything. And they're creating diseases. They make up new diseases that they then provide vaccines for. It's the most profitable part of their business. And the drug company is the most profitable industry to get into. And they have enormous power. Their money buys everything. They subsidize all of the medical schools. Doctors are trained on textbooks written by the drug industry. The peer-reviewed journals write articles about new drugs and medical treatments that are written by drug company doctors who have been paid off to write, or even more insidiously by doctors who have not written those articles but have been paid to sign their name to them. The articles are written up by drug company shills. It's a very corrupt system. Marcia Angel, who was editor of the New England Journal of Medicine for many years, very prestigious publication, wrote a book exposing all of it. She said that 65 to 70% of the tests, the information in those journals cannot be replicated or repeated. They're worthless. And you know that it's a basic tenet of scientific advancement that repeatability must be established. Otherwise, you don't have anything worth proceeding with.
Well, thank you, Steve. That wraps up our show for today. This is Left on Left. I'm Gloria.
I've got another hour's worth. What are you talking about?
That was very informative.
Joined here by Professor Jayme.
From you.
Joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like, donate, and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. So long. Thank you, Steve and Jayme.
Thanks, Steve.
And Jayme.
Yeah, thank you, Jayme. I gotta run because
I mean, we could keep talking as long as people want to.
No, I gotta split. You can talk to Steve. You could keep going with Steve.
We just had to wrap it up for the radio bit.
I gotta go to the hospital
as long as you guys want. So
I gotta go to the hospital and see Dad. So I'm on my way.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, that was very informative. I learned a lot. So
yeah.
Well, I don't think I told you anything you didn't already know. Don't be modest.
Things I didn't know everything. Yeah.
Well,
like
but remember, the audience listening to this might not have known. So that's what.
Ambrose Bierce said that the devil did grin, for his favorite sin was the pride that aped humility. So don't have any false humility. You have an incredible store of knowledge in your head. I'm always amazed at what you come up with. So
thank you. Well, I'm not an expert on the pharmaceutical industry, so
and neither am I.
Yeah, but you had some good information.
Yeah, it's great.
So. Yeah.
Jayme, how did they get you to do all this work?
Well, I'm working with Pasta.
I gotta run, guys, because
I'm gonna head out too. Okay, thank you.
All right,
we'll be in touch soon.
See you, Jayme.
Bye.
And
you guys.
Gloria, bye. Well, I'll wrap up the show. So, Steve, I met Craig Pasta Jardula at for the second time at Rage Against the War Machine, and we talked about working together. So I jumped in with him. And then when we started doing Left on Left, it was Pasta with Jayme. And a few months ago, Pasta's mom had to go into the hospital for like just a life-changing event, right?
Right.
So Gloria stepped in to kind of fill in for that, but now it seems like Gloria's taken over the show while Pasta's moving on to other projects. So, but I continue to work with Gloria and Jayme.
Well,
so,
it's good. It's good that
good.
it's good that Gloria came in. We need a woman. It's too bad that she's not black and a hunchback and a lesbian, and I mean, we barely score points.
Hey, it's 2025 and Trump's the president. Didn't you hear? DEI is on the way out now. They're getting rid of all that DEI stuff. So we don't have to follow that anymore. We can go back to natural diversity, where you just get people who are really good at doing the job to be the person who is doing the job. So, but yeah, I really enjoy it. I believe in the mission that these guys are doing. I love the fact that there are still some mainstream media outlets, even if it's legacy radio, that are still getting some voices like this out there, so people can listen to this in their cars. It surprises me how many people still are listening to traditional radio just in their cars, and they're not all switching over to podcasts. So that's
not every car is. My prediction is that in a year, 2 years, 3 years, there won't be radio, television, podcast, internet, this, that. There'll be a button you press. People want content. They don't care or know where it's coming from. And some cars now are equipped to get internet broadcasts, and they'll be able to get this. And you will be in cars. Right now, only radio. But what do you do to pay the rent? I mean,
well, that's a complicated story. I do a lot of freelance work outside of working with these guys. Sometimes these gigs do pay, but it used to be good on YouTube because there was a fair merit-based algorithm, but YouTube has gone a long way to eliminating that.
Yep.
So without the merit-based algorithm, and when they demonetize channels, then the revenue doesn't come in anymore. I mean, the Pasta and Fiorella were running Combo Couch before Pasta's created this Pasta to Go channel that we're on right now, and they were monetized. They were just soaring, and they were just getting tons of people. But then around 2018 or so, YouTube had one of their another adpocalypse event where they just kneecapped all independent news channels, and everybody got hit.
And what was the reason? What's the reason they did that? I never was clear on that.
I think it was something to do with Trump. It's been a while, so I don't exactly remember. But the different channels were talking about different things. It got really bad during the pandemic, because especially with channels that were talking about ivermectin and different ways we could help mitigate exposure to the COVID virus. That was one of the big things that got them hit. But before that, they were talking about elections integrity. So in the 2020 election, there was all that election denial talk, but Fiorella and Pasta were very good in looking at not voter fraud, but election fraud, looking at the integrity of our systems. And they were talking about that, and that got their channels struck pretty hard before all of the stuff happened with the pandemic. And before that too, there was all the Medicare for all talk. All the channels were talking about that, because I mean, again, if you got universal health care, that would hit the bottom line of all the health insurance and pharmaceutical industries. And you can't talk about that stuff. You can't go after their bread and butter.
It's why they're getting rid of TikTok, because too many people on TikTok were exchanging ideas namely about Gaza and Israel.
Mostly about that,
was not.
It's not because it's a Chinese-owned company and they don't care about that. And even if that is true, at this point, I would trust the Chinese government with all my data more than the U.S. government.
All that data is available anyway.
Yeah,
it's given away free by everybody on Facebook,
It's all about censorship. Is why they do all what they're doing. And if you're not really providing meaningful information, they're going to leave you alone. So you only catch flack when you're flying over the target.
Yep.
So I do believe in what these channels do, all the independent media. I think it's really important. We got to get the voices out there. Every time they strike one of us down, two more need to rise up. So we got to make it really difficult for them to shut us down, even if they're doing what they got to do to shut us down. But in the meantime, we just, those of us out here, we still got to find ways to make money. So I do this, and then I try to do other stuff on the sides and then I'm also have to work. Everything I do have to work from home because I've now become like my caretaker for my elderly parents. So it's I'm juggling a lot of things, and my life is is pretty much, this is all I do now. So
as long as you don't have to sell apples, on the street corner.
Well, that's not so bad compared to some other jobs out there.
Yeah. That's true. All right. Anyway, it's good that you're around. There are a few guys like you, but not many.
It's more than you think, but I kind of am in a fortunate position where I can do this because I am able to stay home, and since I have to stay home anyway, and be available to take care of my parents when they need me.
Where is home?
Right now I'm in Richmond, but normally I'm in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, keep it up. One day we may win.
One day. This fight we've been fighting since the 1960s at least. But
right.
I think eventually things will have to turn around. It might not happen in my lifetime, but eventually. So
well, the odds are against it. The U.S. is collapsing. I don't know
that a slow collapse.
Yeah, well, we'll be gone before it no, maybe not. They're predicting in 6 months the U.S. dollar will collapse, and that will be hard times for everyone.
I don't know. I mean, it could be, but this empire that we're living in is very resilient, and they've always have different tricks to pull up their sleeves. I think before our dollar collapses, they'll sacrifice Europe as our vassal states and throw them under the bus.
Europe has already been sacrificed. That's why I couldn't understand why the leaders in Europe allowed that to happen, except that they were all bought out.
They're all part of the same empire.
Well, I would think that the Bundestag was paid off because, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline killed Germany. They have no energy. They have to buy it from the United States at 6 times the price. I mean, it's just
absolutely like all these Western nations. They're run by quisling governments, but by people who do not look out for the interest of the people who live in those countries. So we have all these Western nations. We don't really have true sovereignty. We're all captured by the same global empire, and the United States, or more specifically Washington D.C., is the seat of power of that empire.
But
they don't care about any of the people that are living within it.
Well, that's true, but the problem is that the people who are living within it, by and large, a large proportion of them are doing okay. In the United States, I'd say there are 40 to 50 million people, the professional class, lawyers, doctors, teachers, who are they go to the supermarket, there are still 50 different kinds of coffee you can choose, and they have 2 cars, and things are not really bad. Yeah, it's a little harder. Grocery prices are going up, but by and large, they're not panicking. But when things get bad, you're going to have real problems. And
when they start getting affected.
That's right.
And that might start happening.
Is some guy on a white horse and a black hat is going to ride in as a savior, and it may be even worse. We don't know. I mean, Hitler was able to unite a disgruntled German population who were doing very badly.
Also, too, and because after World War I, the left wing in Germany was pretty much eliminated, which is where we're at right now. I mean, one reason we didn't turn towards more fascism in the 1930s was because we had a strong left. We had socialist and communist groups out there that were pushing back on government after the 1920.
But what happened in Germany? The left was not decimated after World War. The left was very strong. That was the whole point. That was why the industrialists said, let's put this funny man with a mustache in power. He'll get rid of the left, and then we'll get rid of him. But it wasn't so easy to get rid of.
But they didn't have a strong political presence, because otherwise they would have had political leaders in place that would have been able to push back against the H-man.
Well, they fought with each other. The fact is that the left, theoretically, historically, you have 10 people on the left who agree on 99.9% of everything. They can't walk 10 feet without tearing each other's eyes out.
Yeah,
Whereas
true.
on the right, they say, we hate each other, but we got to go from A to Z. We'll go to A to Z, then we'll fight.
They all agree on imperialism or the capitalist
that's
idea, and they fight for that first and foremost.
And
And
then
then
later
anything else they disagree on is secondary. The left puts all their little petty minor disagreements up front and refuses to work together.
And the right pushes that.
Yeah, and it's a self-imposed divide and conquer strategy.
Yep.
The left divides itself, and if we can't unite and put all those little petty disagreements aside, and say, look, you don't need to like these people to work with them. If you agree on these other issues, just work with them. You don't need to like them.
Well, it's called called circular firing squad.
Yeah, it really is. It's frustrating.
But
a lot of it's just personal issues too. It can just be personal.
Yeah, that too. But the one issue of working with the Rage Against the War thing, there's a legitimate objection to walking together with groups whose politics you may dislike or even despise, because although the cause that you're walking for might be good, you give them legitimacy. And then after this one battle is over, they are now more powerful because they have legitimacy and they can fight you better later. So, it's not so cut and dried.
Well, I feel like if that's true, and it may be true, then you got to fight that battle when the time comes.
Yeah, no.
Right now, we got to win where we're at, and we keep kneecapping ourselves. We can't win anything.
Yep.
And it goes back to the Abraham Lincoln. He said, "Divided we fall, united we stand," and it's absolutely true. I mean, every time you see groups that get united, groups of people can achieve great things. But you have to get people on the same page and fight for that cause, and put everything else aside, or else that thing you're trying to go after is just going to keep winning. And the other positive thing that I think about a lot is that any system created by humans can be taken down by humans. So as insurmountable as this thing that we look at that we're going up against right now,
that may have been true.
It can be taken down. It's happened before.
That may have been true at one time, but now with the advent of AI, if we create something that becomes stronger than humans, we can't take it down. And there is that possibility of a singularity.
True, like with the AI. Well, that would be something that's not created by humans if AI is creating it. So that would be very tough. I mean, it shocks me because we've got some of these people coming in right now. They're touting AI and what they want to do with it in this new Stargate plan. And I'm watching this and thinking, what you're talking about doing is something I've seen in many, 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 many science fiction movies, like 1984. What's the one I'm thinking with Harrison Ford? Blade Runner, Minority Report, Terminator, The Matrix. A lot of these dystopian nightmare futures. Judge Dredd's another good one, where they have AI doing it. And they create these like dystopian hellscapes. And those are movies. While I like watching those movies, they're good and they're very informative. I don't want to live in those worlds. And the people who are talking about doing AI now are talking about creating those worlds. They watched those movies and said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's do it. And that is terrifying. Because
in the back of their minds, subliminally, they think that they will still be in control. And that's the fantasy. It's like people who think about dying always think of themselves as watching after they're dead, watching how people react. But when you're dead, you're dead. And when you relinquish control, you no longer have it. So. Yeah,
it's like they didn't learn the lessons from those movies and those stories. they think they're above it. And they're going to be subject to it just like the rest of us.
They're going to want to control it, just like the industrialists wanted to control Hitler. It becomes out of your control, and that's the danger. You create things. I mean, it's like the apprentice. The apprentice's broom. What is that?
The Mickey Mouse thing.
Right, it gets out of control. You fool around with men are not meant to tamper with powers beyond that kind of thing, and it's very true.
Well, I think I'm not really against AI, but I'm against our society using AI because of the way it's structured. AI is not going to be something that helps us. But in a different society that would put people first, AI could be an actual boon for the society because it would help you eliminate all the menial tasks and small jobs that people
Absolutely.
don't need to do and free people up to do art. But
But
in
it's
our
never,
society, where the first thing we're doing is using AI to do art, the one thing people actually want to do. We don't need AI to do art because there's
well,
millions of people that want to do it.
it's all every tool has been used simply to help the powerful become more powerful.
Yeah,
The advent
in our
of
society.
radio, of television, of the internet, all these things were gonna free people, but they just fell into control of those people who had the power. It just doesn't work. When FDR was forced to provide all these benefits to the working people, it took about 35 to 40 years for them to lose them, and
Yeah,
they're almost all gone.
almost. They're
So,
still trying to get it all. They can't. These people in charge, they can't stand the fact we got Social Security and Medicaid. They can't stand it.
well,
Uh,
because it means you're not under their control anymore. You have an independent source of income, and they can't squeeze you.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how we allowed this worst element of our society to be in control of everything. It's amazing. The worst people our societies produce are the ones that are in control and have designed
But
our society.
that's natural. Look, there's I'd say about 6% of the human race is sociopathic. Not in the sense of being serial killers, although some are. And these are the ones who have a will to power and they want to control, and whatever they want is for the best. And these are the ones who work their way to the top of countries, of corporations, of parent teachers associations, of co-op boards, of they want that power and they get it.
Mhm.
And it's never going to change because there will always be that 6%. You can't get rid of them. And sometimes you need them. Sometimes you need a general to say, okay, we want these troops here and we want you to go, because sometimes you're under attack and you need it. But
Well, you're right. You won't get rid of these people, but you could have a society that doesn't reward these people, where we value things um, that right now we have perverse incentive structures. We value the things that those people are good at, so
yeah,
those people rise to the top. But if we had a society that valued things that those people weren't good at, then they wouldn't be the ones rising to the top.
but they're the ones who controlled the value system that valued the things that they do best. I mean, you
Right, and
control your
that
own
has been a thing that has kind of evolved over about 200, 300 years, maybe 400.
Well, it's always been that way. Those people with the power took it. I mean, from the very beginning, the biggest caveman got to be chief. Uh,
Well, going back to might makes right, but that didn't really. But that wasn't. But back then they didn't have societies where money equals power, and now it's not the biggest, strongest person. It's the person with the most money is
that's
the most
correct.
powerful.
Well, it's just a different kind of club, you know.
Yeah.
So that's you don't have to beat somebody to death. You can starve him, and I don't see that really changing. You know, every time you take something away from corporations, they retain their power, and so they get it back again. There
Mhm.
has to be a way of like, we shouldn't have Facebook and Google and Amazon. Those are wonderful corporations in the things they can do. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to be in the same business that Amazon was in. Had a mail order business. We were the almost the largest private mail order company in the country. We did 3% of all the third class mail in the country. Um, but it took us 6 weeks to get a product delivered. At that time, that was considered great. Today, I order something that comes tomorrow from Amazon.
Mhm.
They do a wonderful job. Customer service is wonderful. You didn't get something, you call up. They don't ask you for proof. They say, okay, we'll send you another one.
Yeah.
But if you're that big and powerful, you're going to warp the society.
Yes.
You're going to
Absolutely.
bend it to your will, and you can't have centers of power controlled by so few people.
Right.
And
That's why there should be limits on how much individuals and corporations could earn, so they don't become bigger and more powerful than the government, which is what we have allowed. China's
FDR,
kind of the opposite. They are working extremely hard to make sure that the government will always be more powerful than individual corporations, so that they
But
will
the
always
government
be
is
in
not-
government.
yeah, but if the government is not democratic, that doesn't do you much good. But
Well,
FDR
yeah.
proposed in the 40s during the war that nobody should make more than $25,000 a year, and that, of course, is equivalent to about $600,000 a year today. Not a small amount of money, but of course he couldn't get it passed. They just wouldn't happen. But
there was a period of time where we were taxing everything over like $1 million,
91%,
at like 90%, and
yeah.
That was a good idea. Why don't we still do that?
The company did very well. The country did very well.
Yeah, the country. That's when America became great, right? We were,
but it wasn't because of the taxation. It was because of the unique position of the United States after World War II. Was the last man standing. We were not damaged. And then, of course, once all the other countries caught up, didn't happen. Nixon got out of the gold standard. And then when companies found that because of computers and airplanes, they could move their businesses overseas where the labor was cheap, that was the end of it. And they warped the government to reward the offshoring of our jobs.
And if we had a government that cared about its people before it cared about corporations, which is what all of the documents say it's supposed to do, they would never have done that. They would have said, okay, you want to take ourselves off shores, we're going to tax the hell out of you when you try to do business here again.
Or we won't let you bring this stuff back in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But we don't do that. We encourage it. We facilitate it. We incentivize it.
That's right.
And look at where we're at now. It's not a good situation.
Look at when I talked about not being able to turn in a dime, we have 800 military bases around the world, which is obviously not for defense. It's for aggression and for subordination of any dissent. But how do you can't close those bases tomorrow. You got several 100,000, maybe several million people involved in all those things. You bring them back home. What do you do with them? How do they get a living?
It's the only jobs program we offer to Americans is a military industrial complex. I think if I were in charge, like if I were to become president, the way I would tackle it. Well, the way I see it is like, I think most people that I've known and ever met would be a better president than the presidents we've had in my lifetime.
Yep.
And I've been around for quite a while now. I mean, I'm about to hit 50 years old. So
you're a juvenile delinquent. I'm 87 now.
Yeah, I know I don't feel old, but and sometimes around some of the people I work with, I feel like a baby again. But most of the people I've met in person, I think every single one of them would be better leaders than any of the leaders we've ever had. So, because regular people, I think they know what would be good for society. Even if they're bad at the job, they'd still be better than the ones we've had.
You don't have to be an expert in politics. Look, it's like when Norman Mailer ran for mayor of New York. He said, "You have no political experience. What do you know about the police or the fire?" And he said, "I hire a police chief, man. I hire a fire department chief. Yeah. I don't do it myself. I say what I want done, and I have my experts do it. If I wanted to set up some kind of a broadcast situation, I'd call you. I wouldn't do it myself. I don't have to have experience. I say, I want to talk to this guy this way, and you would set it up."
Yeah, honestly, I look at it. If you don't have political experience, that's a bonus. That makes you a better choice in my book.
Right. I would vote for Jimmy Dore as president,
There's a lot of people I would vote for. There's a lot of people I think would be better leaders, make better governors than the garbage that we're served from our ruling class.
The problem is, in order to get anywhere, you have to make compromises. It's anybody who finally reaches a pinnacle of power in any place has made promises and betrayed confidences and done all sorts of things to get there. So look at what Tulsi Gabbard had to do. She was
excommunicated from the Democrats.
Then she suddenly, in order to get approval, she had to change her positions. And McGovern, Ray McGovern, oh, she disappointed me. It's no good. Well, the fact is, every candidate lies to get into office. Yeah. And then afterwards, they betray their promises. But it's always been that they've said good things, and when they got in, they did bad things. Well, now maybe somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who renounced her good things and said she's for bad things, when she gets in, she'll lie too, and she'll be back with the good things.
I mean, that's possible. I'm kind of on the fence about her. I volunteered for her in 2020. Because I believed in a lot of the things she was saying when she was running. I mean, I believe the things that she was talking about. I mean, I don't know how sincere she was, but she was saying things that I agreed with.
Well, what attracted me first to her was not her principles or her politics, but she's good looking. I like to watch her.
Well, there's that too. But for me, what it was the principle where she stood with Bernie in 2016 and threw away her meteoric rise in the Democratic Party for principles. Right. And I said, okay, that's something I can respect. Right. And that's the kind of thing that the Democratic Party really needs are people like her. And they got rid of her. And then it's funny, after this last election cycle, they were saying, oh, we need the left needs its own Joe Rogan. And it's like, well, you had a Joe Rogan. His name was Joe Rogan, and you ran him out of the party.
Right.
So you're never going to get a Joe Rogan, because if you did, you would kick him out.
Yeah. But what you call the left is really a very small group of people with power, and the rest of the left goes along because they get brainwashed.
They have nowhere else to go.
Yeah, and
nowhere else to go. Like that bothers me too. Like the Democrats call themselves left, and they're not a left-wing party. No. They're not, and it besmirches everything that people who actually are on the left stand for, because the way the Democrats govern is awful, and all the people who are Republicans or self-described conservatives, they look at the Democrats and think that's horrible, and then they think that's the left, and then everybody who is on the left actually fighting for things actually different from the Democrats, they get lumped in with the Democrats because of the language we use. And I think that's intentional. They've co-opted the left-wing language to do whatever it is they want, their neoliberal agenda, their austerity programs. And then the left gets blamed for all that, when the real left doesn't want anything to do with the Democratic Party.
But the left, left, right, those terms have never been really worth much. It's up and down. It's rich and poor.
That's where the real fight is.
The haves who are trying to protect what they have. And that's what it's always been about throughout history. Right. The left only came about that to left-right in the French Assembly during the French Revolution, and has nothing to do with what goes on today. And people are divided. Somebody can be against imperialism, but he's against minimum wage. What's left, what's right? There's no such thing anymore.
Well, tell that to the majority of Americans who still vote and believe voting can do something.
Well, it can theoretically.
It could. I think I do believe in democracy, and I think it can matter. I just don't believe in America having a democracy.
Right.
I don't think our democracy is worth much of anything. Unfortunately,
it's a matter of what you have to vote on. By the time you get to vote, your choices are very limited, because it's all been pre-selected.
Yeah, what do I care if corporate candidate A or corporate candidate B wins? It's not my life is going to be worse either way. So why should I bother participating in voting for either of those people? Right. I think the only thing worth voting on still today is if you live in a ballot initiative state, and which is where we can do direct legislation by the people. That's something worth voting for. But outside of that, with these Democrats and Republicans, I don't see a point. Like, I will personally never vote for another Democrat or Republican again the rest of my life, and I've been that way for over a decade now. So, but I do see value in voting for some independent candidates. But when is an independent candidate ever going to have a realistic shot of winning?
The point is that good people sometimes have to run in a Democratic primary, because it's the only game in town. Yeah, you can be an independent and virtue signal and go down in flames with the boat, but you won't accomplish much. So Bernie Sanders, when he wanted to run, he had to run as a Democrat.
True, but even if you get in as a Democrat, then you either got to get on board with the Democratic Party's agenda or you get out.
Or
It doesn't even
you,
matter if you run as a Democrat or not, because even if you are good, having good intentions, if you get into that Democratic Party, there's nothing you're going to do to change it from the inside. It's a bear or a shark, and it's going to eat you, and you can't change it from the inside. It's just going to crap you out.
well, sometimes you can change things from the inside, but it
Maybe
matters.
in the Republican Party, I mean, that's what Trump has actually done. And people like Matt Gaetz did make some moves. The Republicans actually still believe in democracy, where the Democrats do not. The Democrats, you have to fall in line and do exactly what they tell you to do, or you get out.
Yep.
So,
Too bad.
but I do think there's power in the people if the people can get organized. And like you said, there's a lot of people that are comfortable right now, and they've been comfortable, but that number of people who's comfortable keeps going down and down and down every year. So eventually we'll hit a point where there will be a turning point, and then those people are going to be looking for somewhere to go, and that's why we need to be ready to welcome them in and leverage their power, because those people who do are like the upper middle class people who are making, they make a decent living where they can keep their head above water and not have to worry about the bills so much. Once they start feeling the hurt, they're the ones who are going to actually be able to drive some change. But
But
as long as
when they see the body bags.
Yeah. Yeah, but right now they're still too comfortable. So until that changes, but you get more and more of those people starting to see things differently every year. And I used to be one of those people. So it is, for me, it was like a 10-year journey of changing my outlook on the way things are. And once I started to really learn about politics, like when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I thought I knew about politics, and I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. But
when I was 20, I thought the New York Times was the greatest thing in the world. What a wonderful, marvelous institution.
Yeah. I think it's not even a rag that's fit to wipe my butt with.
Well, when you want to know the baseball scores or the weather, you got to look at the Times, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Everything else,
and that's not even true anymore. There's a lot of better places to go than the Times for that. But I know what you're saying. Yeah, and it's amazing when you start looking into them, and you can go back 100 years with the New York Times and see how wrong they are on all the issues, because they have always been an institution that has existed to serve power.
Yep.
To serve the ruling class.
Well, they are power. They're part of it.
Yes, they are. Yeah. They are not a friend of the regular American worker. They have always been against what the American people want, and they still are. Right. They only get it right once the writing is on the wall about that issue. Everything's been exposed, and then they'll say, "Oh yeah, this is the way things are." Right. They're never on the leading edge of something.
They will deplore the death toll in Gaza, but they will never do anything about stopping it. No. They will not talk about it. It's like that priest in Latin America, I forget his name, who said that when I feed the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist.
That's right. And they just, everything in our world, in our society. I think there's other parts of the world that might have things, be doing things better than us. But in our society, everything's upside down. Everything's backwards. We're doing it all the wrong way. And just hopefully more and more people wake up and start figuring that out. And,
well, let's see. Maybe China will be the solution to the world's problem.
Well, in some ways, maybe that's true. But I do like, I'm not 100% confident that China's the right answer. But I do like the fact that they are looking to build, I guess I don't really see them as an empire, but if we frame it in a way of talking about them as an empire, they're trying to build their empire through cooperation and mutual beneficiary projects. And
but they will have the same power. You have to really understand that when they go and help you build ports and railroads and roads and all that kind of, they will own them. And they will be embedded in your economic
True.
system. And
But
they
they
exert the same kind of power as the U.S. does.
but they have a different way of looking at private property and ownership than us, which might be a saving grace. I'm still up in the air about that. So I'm not 100% sure that like China can be a savior of any sorts, but I do think there are some things they're doing that is much better than us. And
Clearly, yeah.
and yeah, I think in some ways, a lot of times when we make an enemy of the United States, that places an enemy because they are the threat of the good example.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we
Otherwise,
can't stand to have some other country doing something well and having the people here seeing that wanting to do it here too.
right. Otherwise, why do we care what goes on in Cuba? Why, right?
No, we don't. Yeah, there's so many things that need to change, and the wrong people are in power, and I don't know how that changes through our political system. I just
Well,
don't see
you're working to do that. You're doing your
Well,
bit to get
I've-
the word out.
I feel like we're working to be ready for when some sort of collapse happens, or when an event happens where it's time for the change. We're going to be ready to be the ones who help organize it and manage it, so that the people who are now new to it on board will have somewhere to turn to, and then we can help facilitate it into a change that we would like to see. But when power collapses and that creates a vacuum, so a lot of different forces will be there to challenge for filling that vacuum. And I want people who have our mentality to be at the forefront of trying to go in there and fill that vacuum. But I don't know. I don't see a time. I don't have any kind of time frame for when that may happen. I mean, I do think it's inevitable, but it could be a decade from now. It could be 200 years from now. So, yeah, because empires rise, empires fall. And I think they fall about as quickly as they rose. So we were an empire that came into fruition in a fairly short period of time, less than 200 years. So I think our fall will be in less than 200 years as well.
Falls are always faster than ascents. You know.
Well, I mean, it took the Roman Empire a very long time to fall. They were in a slow decline for like hundreds of years. As things just started to slowly crumble and fall apart. But they hung on. They hung on for a long time. But I think our empire is probably going to crash and burn much quicker than that.
Well,
So.
let's see. Let's see. I just hope that I'm not around to see it.
Yeah, because a crashed empire is not a fun place to be. Then living in the world after the empire crashes, that's fine. But living through the crash is not a good time. And it's hard to actually assess where we're at, since we kind of inherited the British Empire to an extent. How much of the empire we have built was on our own, was on our own, or was it because of the things that we adopted by taking over for the British? That makes it a difficult calculation.
Yeah.
So,
well, we'll see. We have good seats.
we do. Internet lets us see everything that's going on,
Right.
as long as they don't do nuclear war. So,
Right.
and hopefully, if nothing else, that's the one thing Trump is going to make sure doesn't happen.
Let's hope. From your lips to God's ears.
Yep. So,
all right.
Good talking to you, Steve.
And you too.
All right. Well, maybe we could do this again. It does sound like you have a whole lot to talk about. So hit up Gloria and say if you got another topic. I'm sure they'd like to bring you back on again.
Okay. Take care.
All right. Get out of here, and I'm going to wrap up the show.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that little bonus discussion we had there. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things going on in the world, and I'd like to see a lot of that stuff changed, but all we can do is just try to make things a little bit better and just be ready when the time comes to act. So that's why I want to do what I'm doing here. I do like the thought of I'm planting trees today, not so I can enjoy the shade, but for the next generation will be able to enjoy the shade. And then I see that's what, in a lot of ways, that's probably what we're doing here. Also, Gloria had to cut out pretty early, but she did want to talk about this. I'll show this on screen real quick. So she's part of the Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement, and she put this flyer out to talk about what they were doing today, and she put left on here. But also, they have a Zoom meeting tonight, and if you want to attend that, she's got information to where you can find it. I don't want to put the specific information on the screen because I don't think that's supposed to be public. But here we go. So at tonight, January 23rd, they're going to have a Zoom meeting to talk about food sovereignty. So if you go to the Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement website, I don't know if they have a website. Let me check. I know she sends out this this letter, but I don't know about their website. Okay, they do have a website. All right, here it is. It's Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement.org. It's very, very long, very long URL, but you can just type in Green Renaissance Sovereign Rights Movement in your search engine and it will come out. Go to the .org one and you can find out about the organization there. And they will have links and information to that you can follow to find out about these events that they're doing. But tonight they are having a Zoom meeting. It's going to be at 8:30 p.m. And if you go to their website, you'll be able to find the details for how to join that. And I'm sure they'd love to have more people join that conversation tonight. So that's something Gloria definitely wanted to talk about, but she did have to run. She's dealing with a lot of stuff, having to run back and forth between the hospital. It seems like all of us right now, me, Pasta, Gloria, we're all dealing with elderly parents, and it's a real chore, but it's something that it's important to do. Taking care of your parents, they took care of you, and you got to return that favor. So anyway, that I think is all we've got for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I'm a behind the scenes guy. I like doing the engineering work more than talking to the camera. But I've gotten a little bit more used to it. So today we recorded 2 segments for the radio. After this, I'm going to have to take the video down and chop it up and get it ready so it'll fit. And that's a whole nother bit of work to do. That usually takes way more work than doing this. But I know some of you out there really enjoy watching this process and getting it done. If you're like a radiophile like me, seeing the behind the scenes stuff is always exciting. So anyway, that's going to do it for today. I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. Thanks for watching. This is Pasta to Go with presenting Left on Left, which is a radio show on WBAI and the Pacific Radio Network. Have a good one, and we'll see you next week.